my name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my November 2022 reading wrap-up. I will have the content warnings for all of the books I talk about today linked down below in the description, along with my journal with me and spoiler-free reviews that I did for these books. Those will all be down there as well. So with that, I have 5 books to talk about today, and let's go ahead and get into it. And the first book that we are going to be talking about today is Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. So this follows our main character, who is secretly a 9-tailed fox who has to devour the energy of men to survive. After feeding one night, she runs into a human boy who is being attacked by a goblin in the forest. In order to save him, she violates the rules of her survival. She then loses her fox speed in the process. These two then develop a complex relationship with one another. However, when a generations-long feud reignites, our main character must choose between his life and her immortal one. This book felt long, which I think both worked for and against it for me. It's pretty slow paced, which on one hand, I loved this, and I loved all the time that we got to spend with the characters. But when it comes to the actual story, while I did love all of the downtime and the exploration of the characters and their relationships, there was a significant portion of this book where it felt like that was all there was to this story, which I felt like ended up hurting the more fantasy action portions of this book for me. I also felt like there were times where the characters would just kind of say or do things because it was what was needed in order to keep the story moving along, and it just kind of felt too convenient. And then there were also some important characters that I thought were pretty underdeveloped. And there was one reveal that I did not like, but there was also one that I did. And I also really liked both of our main characters. I enjoyed their dynamic with one another, and I really enjoyed following them. I feel like I got really invested, and I do feel like the story does give you a lot of content to get invested in, like that combined with the pacing. But overall, I am really glad that I have finally read this book. It sat around on my TBR for way too long, and now it doesn't have to do that anymore. And I also just hauled the sequel, and I'm really looking forward to reading that, and I am going to be giving Wicked Fox 4 out of 5 stars. So next up is This Wicked Fate by Kalynn Bayron, which is the sequel to This Poison Heart. This Poison Heart follows our main character, who has a hidden power over plants. When she inherits a house from her birth mother, she also gains a space to test out her powers. But as she begins to bring the garden back to life, she uncovers that she has also inherited a dark secret, and her ancestors are not going to let her be until she accepts that she is the keeper of the dark power of the poison garden. This is also a book that I am conflicted about. I loved book 1. It is one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year, and it took me a while to get used to what this sequel was going for, especially in terms of like tone and atmosphere, because I did feel a shift between book 1 and book 2. There's also a lot that I really thought needed to be more developed in here, from certain characters to the romance, especially the romance. At first I thought I wanted This Poison Heart to be longer and to just have this book become part of that one, but I don't know, I've thought about it for a little while now, and I kind of think that I just want this one to be longer because there is so much more that I wanted to be developed. That being said, there is a lot that I really liked about this. I love the characters and the family aspect of it all. There are a lot of fun and also really heartwarming moments that just made me smile. And I also do think this book has some incredibly beautiful descriptions, especially when it comes to like the plants and the plant magic, or things that happened in the story that kept me excited to keep reading. I got to learn about the world and the lore and the history, and I loved all of that. And once I got used to what did feel more like an adventurous atmosphere, I did really like it, even if it wasn't what I was originally craving from this book. And overall, I still really love this duology. This one is like a 3.5, kind of rounded up to a 4, kind of not. Where This Poison Heart was a very strong 5-star, and I am very excited to see what this author does next. Next up is the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. At the beginning of each decade, the sun's power must be replenished so that the evil obsidian gods can stay at bay. 10 semi-dioses are chosen to compete in the Sunbearer Trials, where the loser is sacrificed so that their body may protect everyone for the next 10 years. Our main character Tio, who is the trans son of the goddess of birds, has never really worried about the trials other than worrying about others in regards to the trials. However, that all changes when he gets chosen to compete against opponents who are better trained and more powerful than himself. And speaking of very strong 5 stars, This book is definitely one of them. There is so much that I loved about this book, which I did expect going in, but it still managed to meet and then also exceed my expectations. I loved our main character and I loved following his journey. I think this book has some really strong character growth, and then he's also just super fun personality-wise. This book also features what has to be one of my absolute favorite friendships that I have ever read. They had so many fun and adorable moments that made me so incredibly happy. Once again, this book did have some really beautiful descriptions, especially when it comes to the various cities that they traveled to, and I got really sucked into the atmospheres and just the world and the story itself. I also loved the trials. I thought they were really cool, even if I did get a little bit lost towards the end of the last one, which is like the only complaint that I have about this book, by the way. But the trials reminded me of like a reality competition show slash game show. I thought that that was fun, and what was also really fun was just how brutally competitive they were towards each other. And on that note, I do really appreciate how every character contributed to this story. I've also gone this long without mentioning the romance, which is like not okay, because I really like them. They have a personality contrast that I am always very weak towards, and this book was no different. And I am so excited for the next book because I desperately need to be back into this world and with these characters. And I also think the story is going in some really interesting directions, and I cannot wait to see where everything ends up, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. So next up is Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a dark fantasy novella that is set in 1883 and follows our main character Celeste, who takes on the role of defending her sister in the courts after she's accused of murdering a member of the ruling class. Rebecca Roanhorse is an author that I have really enjoyed in the past. I haven't read the Trail of Lightning sequel yet, but I did enjoy Trail of Lightning, and I loved Black Sun, and I loved most of Fevered Star. So I expected to also have a really great time with this one, especially since I really like dark fantasy, but unfortunately that was just not the case. I really hated our main character, which has me conflicted because I do think that you may be supposed to, but there was just not nearly enough development between her and her sister for me to even like sympathize with our main character's actions and behavior, which again may be the point. I don't know. I just know that I was not having a good time at all. That being said, there were things that I did really like about this, including the setting and the overall atmosphere. It felt like a dark fantasy mystery western, which I thought was an interesting and really fun combination and balance. There was also a lot that did get established in terms of the world and world building, and I do think that this world really did come to life, and everything that I was reading in regards to it felt really compelling. I would have loved to spend more time in this world actually, just like maybe with different characters and a different story. And there's part of me that wonders if this wasn't a novella, if I would have liked it more. Like maybe I just wanted this to have more space to develop and establish things. And I also do think that maybe this would work better on a reread for me now, since I know more of what I'm getting myself into, because it was going really well up until like the last third or so of the book. So for now, it is unfortunately a 2-star, but maybe that will change one day. And the final book that I have for this wrap-up is The Marrow, Thieves by Cherie Dimaline. This takes place in the world where most of humanity has been destroyed by global warming, and the indigenous people of North America are being hunted and harvested for their bone marrow, as it contains the key to resolving why the rest of the population is not able to dream. This follows our main character Frenchie as he and his companions struggle to run and survive with the goal of making it to the north. This was a book that I found to be super compelling overall. I was also kind of surprised at just how attached I got to these characters, since it isn't that long of a book and there are so many of them. But I do think that this book did a really good job at establishing the characters and the relationships between them. It wasn't always the most in-depth thing in the world for some of the characters, but it was enough for me most of the time. There was also a very large found family element to this story, which is one of my favorite things ever, so I was not surprised that I also really loved it in this one. And I thought our main character has some really strong character growth and exploration. This story also does have elements that did feel like your typical apocalypse style story, which is something that I do tend to like, so once again, no different for this one. The story itself is set in the future, but it does have a lot of elements that could be connected to real life past and history, and then also modern day, in regards to how indigenous people are often and have been treated. There were some scenes towards the later portion of this this book that I did not love, specifically in regards to our main character and his love interest. But this book also had some really heartwarming moments and also heart-wrenching moments between the characters. There's a lot of darkness and also a lot of love in this story. I'll definitely be picking up the sequel one day. And speaking of one day, I did read this in one 24-hour period. It wasn't one sitting, but it technically was one day. It was 8 pages read at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I woke up the next day. Sometimes when I go through books in multiple sittings, I'll have trouble like picking them back up, but that was not the case with this one. I always wanted to read it. And I am going to be giving this book 4.25 out of 5 stars, which is already like a high rating on its own, but once I get my hands on that sequel, I do think that my overall rating for this series as a whole could definitely be going up. Okay, so that is all I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer the question that'll be around here if you want to do that. And hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye!